She never could have imagined that silence could echo more powerfully than any spoken word. Natalie sat beside the bistro window, her hands wrapped around a ceramic mug she never brought to her lips. Outside, people laughed freely, vehicles rushed past, life progressed with relentless momentum. But inside her, something had frozen completely still. Across the small round table, Marcus scrolled through his phone, pretending to review an important message, pretending not to notice her eyes studying him. For weeks now, something between them had fundamentally transformed. She could not explain it with words, only experience it as a persistent ache. He used to regard her with warmth that dissolved all her anxieties. Now his glances were brief, distracted, as though his consciousness existed somewhere entirely different. The small gestures had vanished. The morning messages, the late evening conversations, the way he would wait outside her apartment building even during downpours. They had been replaced by silence, flimsy excuses, and that same exhausted phrase, "Work has just been overwhelming." But Natalie was not naive. She understood the rhythm of genuine love, and this one was discordantly offbeat. That morning, she had witnessed something she was not meant to see. Marcus standing outside his office building with another woman. They were not holding hands. They were not even standing particularly close. But there was something in the way he smiled at her, soft, familiar, intimate, like the smile that used to belong exclusively to Natalie. And that observation was sufficient to shatter her fragile calm. Now sitting across from him, she wanted to ask directly. Her heart screamed to know the truth, but her pride whispered caution, so she remained silent until the quietness became absolutely unbearable. "I saw you with someone yesterday," she said at last. Her tone was careful, almost casual, as though she were commenting on the weather forecast. Marcus froze for half a second, just long enough for her to register. "Oh, that," he said too quickly, too defensively. "She's just a colleague from the marketing department. You're reading too much into it." She smiled faintly, though her stomach twisted painfully. "I understand. I trust you." The words emerged softer than she intended. Soft but utterly false. Because the truth was, she no longer trusted him. Not anymore. But she was not yet ready to admit it. Not when her heart still desperately hoped there existed some innocent explanation. The remainder of their time at the bistro was painfully ordinary. He discussed deadlines, complained about exhaustion, mentioned how his phone would not stop receiving notifications. Natalie nodded appropriately, laughed when required, and stared at her reflection in the bistro window, a woman smiling while fracturing internally. When he drove her home later that afternoon, Marcus leaned in to kiss her cheek. "I will call you this evening," he said. She nodded. All right, but he did not call. Hours passed. The sky transformed into deeper shades of gray. Rain began falling steadily, and Natalie sat on her sofa staring at the phone that never rang. Every second stretched like an accusation. She checked his social media profiles. Nothing recent. She checked the time. Too late to call without appearing desperate. She considered texting goodnight, but her pride prevented her once again. It was strange how love could make people behave like strangers occupying the same space. She remembered how Marcus used to eagerly await her messages, how he would tease her playfully for responding late, how he would hold her hand as though he feared losing her. Now he did not even notice when she withdrew it. At midnight, she finally surrendered to waiting. She switched off her bedside lamp and climbed into bed, but sleep refused to arrive. Instead, she replayed every moment of the recent weeks. Every odd excuse, every quiet dinner, every look that failed to reach his eyes. Perhaps she was overthinking. Perhaps he truly was simply overwhelmed with work. Perhaps she was losing trust too easily. But deep within, something whispered that this was not merely a difficult phase. It was a slow, painful goodbye. The following day, Natalie attempted to carry on as though nothing had occurred. She dressed professionally, went to work, smiled at colleagues, and avoided checking her phone too frequently. Yet every vibration made her heart leap. Every ring that was not his number made her chest ache incrementally more. In the evening, Marcus finally texted, "Hey, sorry, absolutely crazy day. Let's meet tomorrow?" She stared at the message for a full minute. Her first instinct was to decline, to make him wait and wonder. But her heart betrayed her fingers. "Sure," she typed back. "Tomorrow works for me." When she arrived at the bistro the next day, Marcus was already seated. He appeared tired but strangely composed, like someone who had already made a decision about something significant. "Hey," he said, standing to embrace her. She felt how brief it was, how hollow. They sat, ordered coffee, and discussed nothing of consequence. Films, weather patterns, work obligations. Every sentence felt like filler, designed to cover something heavier that neither dared articulate. Then, suddenly, his phone vibrated on the table. He reached for it instinctively, then hesitated. The screen illuminated just long enough for Natalie to glimpse a name she did not recognize. Rebecca. Her heart sank. But she maintained her expression carefully neutral. "You can answer," she said quietly. He locked the phone and shook his head. "No, it's fine. Just work-related," Natalie nodded. Of course, her voice was calm, too calm, because in that moment she decided she would not ask again. She would not demand explanations or evidence. Instead, she would observe, listen, and wait. Because sometimes silence reveals more than confrontation ever could. After they departed, he walked her to her car, kissed her forehead gently, and said, "You're incredible. I don't express it enough." The words should have comforted her. Instead, they wounded her because they sounded precisely like something you say when you are already halfway out the door. That night, Natalie stared at the ceiling, her phone resting beside her pillow. She was not confused anymore. Not truly. She knew something was fundamentally wrong, but she also understood that requesting honesty would not necessarily produce truth. So she decided to continue the performance, to pretend, to keep her heart quiet until she knew what she was genuinely confronting. It was nearly 1 a.m. when Marcus's name finally appeared on her screen. Her breath caught, but she did not answer immediately. The message preview flashed, "Good night. Talk tomorrow." But then, directly below it, another notification appeared, one that froze her completely. A new message, same device number, different sender, from Rebecca. "Can't stop thinking about our conversation tonight. See you tomorrow." Natalie's hand trembled as she stared at the glowing screen. Her pulse accelerated, her chest constricted, her thoughts spinning too rapidly to catch. She powered off the phone, placed it face down on the nightstand, and sat there in silence. The room was dark. Her coffee from earlier had grown cold, and her heart, which once believed every word he spoke, finally began to question everything. For the first time, she realized that pretending might actually hurt more than knowing the truth. Still, she whispered to herself, "Not yet. I won't confront this yet." Outside, thunder rumbled through the sky. Inside, her phone illuminated again, from Rebecca. Same place, same time tomorrow. And that is when Natalie understood completely. She was not imagining anything. Something real was fracturing. Something she was not prepared to acknowledge. Something she would have to confront eventually, but not tonight. Tonight, she chose silence, and with it, the beginning of her heartbreak. Sometimes pretending feels easier than facing destruction. Natalie had learned this truth in the most painful way possible. After that night, after seeing Rebecca's name glowing on Marcus's screen, she decided to maintain her silence. Not because she had forgiven him, but because she was not ready to lose him. Every morning began identically. She would wake early, style her hair carefully, and smile at her reflection. Not from happiness, but from habit. Then she would text Marcus first, as though nothing had changed. "Good morning?" He would reply with a brief, lazy response. "Morning." And she would force herself to feel grateful, even for that minimal acknowledgement. She continued pretending. Every dinner they shared, every film they watched, every "I love you" that sounded progressively less authentic than before. Because pretending was easier than asking. Asking meant confronting the answer, and she was not certain she possessed the strength to handle it. But silence does not conceal truth indefinitely. It merely postpones it. One evening, Marcus arrived at her apartment after work. He appeared exhausted, his tie loosened, his smile faint. "Long day," he said, setting his keys on the counter. Natalie smiled gently. "Would you like coffee?" "Please," he sighed, sitting down heavily. She prepared it exactly as he preferred. Black, 2 sugars, the way she had made it 100 times before. But this time her hand shook slightly as she stirred. When she handed him the mug, he looked up at her, and for a brief moment something in his eyes softened. "Thank you," he said quietly. For everything. She wanted to ask what he meant. She wanted to demand why he was thanking her as though this were goodbye. But instead, she simply nodded and sat beside him. They talked about nothing significant. His day, her day, the weather forecast. But beneath every word, tension coiled like a spring ready to release. Then his phone rang. He glanced at the screen, then at her, then back at the phone. "I need to take this," he said, standing quickly. He walked to the balcony, closing the door behind him. Through the glass, Natalie watched him pace. Watched his expression shift from neutral to concerned, to something she could not quite identify. When he returned 10 minutes later, his entire demeanor had changed. "I have to go," he said, grabbing his keys. "Something came up." "At this hour?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. "It's important. Work emergency." He kissed her forehead quickly, too quickly, and was gone before she could respond. Natalie stood in the empty apartment, listening to the echo of the door closing, feeling the weight of another lie settling on her shoulders. She walked to the balcony where he had taken the call and noticed something on the ground. His work badge. She picked it up, intending to text him, but then she noticed something else. A receipt that had fallen from his pocket. She unfolded it carefully. A restaurant receipt. Dated today. For 2 people, her breath caught. The restaurant was across town, nowhere near his office. And the timestamp was during lunch, when he had texted her saying he was in back-to-back meetings. That night, Natalie made a decision. She would not confront him with accusations. She would not demand explanations that would inevitably be more lies. Instead, she would give him one final opportunity to be honest. The next morning, she texted him, "We need to talk. Really talk. No distractions, no phones, just us. Can you come over tonight?" His response took 30 minutes. "Of course. I'll be there at 7. She spent the entire day preparing herself emotionally. She would be calm, direct, and clear. She would ask simple questions and observe his responses. She would finally demand the truth, and if he could not provide it, she would walk away. 7 o'clock arrived. Then 7:30. Then 8. At 8:15, her phone buzzed. "So sorry, something came up at work. Can we reschedule?" Natalie stared at the message, and something inside her finally broke completely. Not with dramatic rage, but with quiet, definitive clarity. She typed a response, deleted it, typed another, deleted that too. Finally, she wrote, "No need to reschedule. I think I have my answer." She powered off her phone before he could reply. That night, she cried. Not the loud, desperate crying of earlier heartbreaks, but the quiet, exhausted tears of someone who had finally stopped fighting the inevitable. The following week, Natalie began the process of letting go. She removed his photos from her apartment. She deleted old messages. She blocked his number, not from anger, but from necessity. She needed space to heal, and she could not do that while he still had access to her heart. 2 weeks passed in relative quiet. She threw herself into work, reconnected with friends she had neglected, started attending yoga classes, and slowly began to feel like herself again. Then, one evening, there was a knock at her door. She opened it to find Marcus standing there, looking worse than she had ever seen him. His eyes were red, his clothes rumpled, his expression desperate. "Natalie, please," he said. "I need to explain." Every instinct told her to close the door. But some small part of her, the part that had loved him, wanted to hear what he had to say. "You have 5 minutes," she said, not inviting him inside. He took a deep breath. "Rebecca is my sister." Natalie blinked, confused. "What? My sister," he repeated. "She moved back to town 2 months ago after her divorce. She's been staying with me while she finds an apartment." Natalie's mind raced. "Then why didn't you just tell me that?" "Because I'm an idiot," he said, his voice breaking. "Because she asked me not to tell anyone yet. She was embarrassed about the divorce, didn't want people knowing. And I thought I could keep it separate from us, but I made everything worse by being secretive." "The restaurant receipt," Natalie said. "Lunch across town. Her therapy appointment. I drove her there and we got lunch after. I should have told you everything." Natalie felt her legs weaken. "All this time, I thought—" "I know what you thought," he interrupted gently. "And I don't blame you. I handled everything wrong. I was so focused on protecting her privacy that I didn't think about how it looked to you." She leaned against the doorframe, emotions swirling. "Why didn't you just tell me when I asked?" Because I promised Rebecca I wouldn't. And by the time I realized I was losing you, I didn't know how to fix it without breaking her trust too. Natalie closed her eyes. You should have chosen honesty, Marcus. With both of us. I know, he whispered. And I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. For a long moment, they stood in silence. I need time, Natalie finally said. This doesn't fix everything. You hurt me. You let me believe something that wasn't true, and that broke my trust. He nodded. I understand. Take all the time you need. I just needed you to know the truth. He turned to leave, then paused. For what it's worth, you were never wrong to doubt me. I gave you every reason to, but you were wrong about one thing. I never stopped loving you. Not for a single moment. He walked away, leaving Natalie standing in her doorway with her heart in pieces, but this time for entirely different reasons. The weeks that followed were complicated. Marcus gave her space, but occasionally sent thoughtful messages, not demanding anything, just letting her know he was thinking of her. She eventually met Rebecca, who apologized profusely for the misunderstanding and confirmed everything Marcus had said. Slowly, cautiously, Natalie began to let her guard down. Not because the hurt had disappeared, but because she realized that love was not about perfection. It was about honesty, even when honesty came late. It was about choosing each other, even after mistakes. 3 months later, Natalie and Marcus met at the same bistro where everything had begun to unravel. But this time, there were no secrets, no hidden phones, no unnamed fears. I'm still working on trusting you completely, she admitted. It's going to take time. I know, he said, taking her hand. And I'll spend however long it takes proving I deserve it. She looked at him, really looked at him, and saw not the man who had hurt her, but the man who had learned from his mistakes. Okay, she said softly. Let's try again, but this time no secrets. About anything, no secrets, he agreed. I promise. Outside, the sun broke through the clouds after days of rain, casting warm light across their table. It felt symbolic, like a new beginning, and this time, when her phone buzzed on the table, Marcus smiled and said, You should answer that. No more hiding, she checked the message and laughed. It was from Rebecca. Tell Marcus he owes me dinner for putting you both through hell. But I'm glad you're giving him another chance. He's an idiot, but he loves you. Natalie showed Marcus the message. He grinned sheepishly. She's not wrong about the idiot part. No, Natalie agreed, squeezing his hand. But maybe we're all idiots when it comes to love. Maybe, he said. But at least we're figuring it out together. And for the first time in months, Natalie felt genuine peace. Not because everything was perfect, but because they had chosen honesty over comfort, truth over pretending, and healing over giving up. Sometimes love means breaking before you can rebuild stronger. Sometimes it means forgiving without forgetting, and trusting again without naivety. As they left the bistro hand in hand, Natalie realized that some stories do not have neat, simple endings. They have complicated middles and uncertain futures. But that does not make them any less worth living. Because in the end, love is not about never making mistakes. It is about choosing to stay and fix them when you do, and that, Natalie thought, was a truth worth holding on to.